Chris. In this video I'm going to show you how to install our side skirts on a Mark 7 Golf. I have a Mark 7.5 facelift Golf R here. So these are a little bit different than the GTIs. GTIs just have one screw in the center that retains the skirt. These look like they have three. So you got one here, and then one in the back inside that pocket. Those three seem to retain it, and then this actually slides off the same way the Mark 7 and 7.5 GTIs do. The 7Rs have a different style skirt that comes up and around, and then 3M tapes onto the lower rocker, so those are different. I have those three screws that I just showed you out. I'm just going to tap on this. Once we get to a certain point, all the pins will release, and then that comes off. So you see we got these studs with a shoulder on them. They slide in to these slots here in the backside. So these are very similar to the 7 and 7.5 GTIs. It looks like just the 7R is a slightly different setup. Over here on the table, I have our factory piece of trim on the top there. This is just clamped on to our skirt. You see our skirt countersunk holes are facing down, or in this case up. I have a couple clamps on here holding it, so I'll show you where you're going to align this. Our front's going to be flush. You can reference the jacking point arrow, and then this edge, so we're looking at the front here. This edge is going to be flush with the push-in pins from the factory trim. You got two of them here, so we'll be flush there. Again, flush with our pin in this center position. Our notch should line up with the screw hole in the factory trim. And then in the back, we're going to be lining up the back edge of our skirt with where the inner piece of the clip changes. If I pull that out a little bit, you'll be able to see there's basically a slot in there. We're going to use that as our alignment in the rear. And then you can just check your back edge and your arrow lines up also. So that's the position we're going to use. You're going to drill all your countersunk holes here, just down the row. Just make sure that you're drilling slow. You only want to come out the back just enough to go through the skirt. So I'll drill all these holes. As I do this, I'm going to pinch the skirt and the factory trim together just so it doesn't shift. And for hardware, we just have a countersunk bolt and then a flange nylock, or a flange serrated nut for the top end. Serrated part is going to bite into the plastic. These nuts are going to be hidden inside the factory trim, so you won't see them. The reason we do it this way is that you're going to end up with the skirt being attached just to this trim. You're not drilling into sheet metal, so you don't have to worry about something rusting out over time. A lot of the other skirts out there require like a self-tapper screw. For the GTI in this model, we use these through bolts on the factory trim so that you're not drilling into sheet metal specifically. Once I have all of them in place, finger tight, I'm going to go through and just tighten them. Because it's a serrated nut, usually it bites on to the plastic and you don't even need to use a wrench here. Before I reinstall, I'm just going to wipe the grime down that's underneath. I'm just using like a detail spray here just to kind of get the worst of it off. We just don't want to drag this across the paint and potentially scratch something when we reinstall the trim and the new skirt. So I have our skirt assembly, factory trim, and then the skirt attached to it, ready to go. I'm going to shake it one more time just to get any kind of shavings or stuff out of there so it doesn't vibrate. I also want to make sure that all my bolts are tight, make sure there's no rattles, and we can put this back on. This is going to have to go on kind of rearward. You'll see this front corner is not quite lined up, and then we're going to slide the whole thing forward. So you got to start by lining some of these up to get an idea where you got to be. Doing this with a second set of hands is a lot easier because there's so many that you got to line up at the same time. And you don't want to force it. If it's not sliding on there, it's usually because one of them is kind of caught on something. So until you can kind of get the first little bit of it to slide without tapping it, you want to make sure that you're not pushing anything, because you don't want to bend one of those studs coming out of the body. There we go. One side done. We'll repeat on the other side. Just make sure that you put your 3 screws back in to retain this so that it doesn't fall off. One thing that helps with getting this on and off, depending how you're working, if you're on jack stands, this might not be a problem, but if you're on a lift or you're working on the ground even, using one of these angle attachments for a drill makes it a lot easier to get this in here. You don't have to worry about the drill having to fit in this direction. So that's a good thing to have. I find that I use this thing all the time around the car. This side gave me a really hard time getting off. I think there was just a bunch of, dirt and stuff in there. What I ended up having to do was turn the wheel so I had a little more space here. I used a tapping block that gave me a little bit more room to come in here and tap this from the behind. A couple heavier swings was fine, and then I'm not damaging the trim. It came right off once it got past some certain point. I don't see anything damaged. It looks like it really was just, there was probably a lot of dirt and stuff built up in there, so it was just creating too much friction. All right, I have our second side ready to go. Again, I'm just gonna shake it, make sure there's no noise, rattling, and then also to get any junk out of there. I already wiped down the lower edge of the rocker so that we're not putting stuff back in there. I'll get that tapped all the way in, put our 3 screws in, and then that's all finished. One last thing, it is possible to push this too far forward, so I'll check right here. I think what looks the best is that your lower piece of trim lines up with the edge of the body match paint. So if this sits proud and is flush with like the fender liner, you can just give that a tap back to get flush there. Here's our finished install. So you can see everything lines up at the front and at the back there. If you have your wheels relatively flush with the fender, these actually sit pretty close to flush, where this corner is going to be flush with the wheel face. Up here it's obviously not as much because this tapers in to almost perfect with that. But at this widest point, when the wheel's straight, that's also pretty flush with the wheel if the wheel is offset to match the fender. This car does have our 7.5R front lip also. That's going to be the same material, same thickness, texture, everything. So if you're looking for a whole kit, you can do that. We also make the berrybacker diffusers for the 7.5R. I'll bring this car outside and take another video also, but it's the middle of the day, so the shadows are going to be pretty bad.